and welcome to Coast Connections. Today we have a wonderful, preeminent Canadian inventor with us. Now, some people in life think their bucket is half full, some think theirs is half empty, and our guest has invented a brand new bucket. So please welcome Don Arney from Salt Spring Island. Hello, Don. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Now, the bucket that you invented is called the Bambi Bucket. And a lot of us may have seen with the forest fires that have been ravaging the province and other parts of the world this past summer, the helicopters flying overhead with the long cable and the bucket at the bottom. Well, Don, that's your bucket. And that's pretty amazing because that bucket has been used in 90% of the countries in the world. How many countries?
Well, it's in 115 countries now.
115
yeah,
countries.
And 90% of the helicopter firefighting is done with the Bambi Bucket.
Wow.
So it's certainly been well accepted.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And you invented this in what year, Don?
1981.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in those ensuing years, thousands of lives have been saved, thousands of hectares of forests, and a lot of animals and ecological habitats.
The Bambi Bucket has just become an inherent part of fire prevention in the urban wildland interface especially, and that's something that we're seeing on the news every day. And we don't even have a fire season anymore. Like in many places like California, it's a fire season year-round.
It is, tragically,
and
yes.
So firefighters need these kind of tools to fight fires.
And Don, what was the need that you were trying to fulfill with inventing that design of a lift bucket?
At the time, there was 3 other products that were on the market. And something I didn't know at the time was that the Canadian Forestry Service and the U.S. Forestry Service were very well of the deficiencies in those 3 products. And so they didn't know, forest agencies like that don't go out and invent new products.
No.
But what they were doing was they were petitioning the operators of those buckets. They were making very, very clear that there were specific deficiencies they wanted addressed. And so eventually they went out and took some positive action and figured, well, if we can't invent the product, we can at least clearly define what it is we're looking for.
What the need is.
And so there were meetings at the Canadian Forestry Service around the time I was getting ready to introduce the bucket. And they defined a list of 12 features they needed in a new generation bucket. And so when they found out about the Bambi Bucket, they came out and we did a demonstration for them. And after the demonstration, we went and talked about what we'd seen and then went through the list. And they discovered the Bambi had all 12 features on their list, plus 2 they hadn't thought of.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's astounding.
So it was the right product at the right time.
At the right time.
Yeah.
And we've got some video we're going to show viewers, Don, just so people can see actually how the bucket works in action. So we're going to run that video here to show, I guess you call it a dip site, when the bucket is being dipped into a lake or a stream or the ocean for
Anywhere
water.
there's water.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As we'll see.
So yeah, as we're seeing now, there it is, dipping in. And that bucket is being filled in about 1 minute, Don?
Well, it depends on the skill of the operator. Some operators are, it's like an aerial dance, aerial choreography. And the secret is coming in with a bit of forward speed, and the Bambi's got ballast on one side of the bucket, at the mouth of the bucket. So if you come in with a bit of forward speed, then the bucket will start to sink at that point.
As it's singing into a swimming pool in this
Well,
shot.
here you've got to come in vertically. You can't have forward speed, obviously, but the forward speed, when the helicopter gives it a bit of a tug, then it dives. And so they can be in and out of the water in 15 seconds or less with a full load. Here in a pool, you've got to, of course, just wait for the bucket to sink, and then you start lifting out. And of course, here the pilot's hyper vigilant because here he's got obstructions to be close by, lighting posts, things like that.
Exactly, buildings, trees. And here they're landing with the bucket. I was curious to see how that happens too when they're coming in at the end of the shift. So we'll just watch that one.
Yeah, what they want to do, the general procedure is they come down and let the bucket sit on the ground, and then the helicopter backs up a bit. And so the helicopter sits down aft of the bucket, so the bucket's in clear view of the pilot.
Just watch that come in. Now that bucket, obviously, I mean, it's in salt water, it's in fresh water, it's being scraped along creek beds, very, very intense temperatures around infernos. So that's very durable fabric that's made of material.
It is very durable, and a lot of these helicopters, especially get into the large ones, a lot of people refer to them as aerial bulldozers. And you know, you're into helicopters that are capable of lifting 10 tons of weight.
Wow.
And if you don't use the right fabrics, those bucket shells can be quickly destroyed. And so,
or compromised, yeah.
Some of the early fabrics that we used in the buckets did suffer that fate, and we knew that we had to address that. And so we went out and researched many different industrial fabrics. And the one that we found that is currently in all our large buckets, 30 times more abrasion resistant than the first ones.
Wow.
And so then we sent them down. They ended up being put on National Guard helicopters, and they went out and tried them in streams where the beds were lava rock.
Oh,
so
very jagged.
Super jagged and abrasive, and after 2 weeks, they're hardly a scratch.
Wow.
So it was the ultimate endurance test.
Wow. And the other thing I want to let viewers know is that you're the owner and founder of SEI Industries, Science, Engineering and Innovation in Delta, BC, and that's where these Bambi buckets are produced.
That's where all the Bambi buckets go out into the world.
Into 115, 120 different countries.
115 different countries.
They made right here in BC.
Yep.
And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the Bambi bucket is used in 90% of the aerial firefighting around the world.
90% of the aerial firefighting is done with helicopters.
Done with helicopters,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Because the fire retardant is usually done with a fixed wing.
Yeah, usually with retardant, they're wanting to lay a mile or two of retardant in one go, so that requires a much bigger tank to carry that much retardant. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, Don, we've got a series of photos here that we're going to show our viewers too, just to give them a sense of the size of the Bambi bucket. We've got some pictures with the helicopter crews and different places in the world where the bucket has been used. So we're going to run those here. And right now we see this one here with the, just to show the scale of the bucket, because it comes in various sizes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we did differently when we came onto the market, was we sized our buckets to fit the specific carrying capacities of individual helicopters, whereas before the Bambi bucket, each manufacturer would make 4 or 5 different sizes, meaning some of the helicopters were carrying too big a bucket and some were carrying too small a bucket. So what we wanted to do was maximize the efficiency of any given helicopter.
And here it's used in a high-rise fire as well, so not just forest fires, but that's pretty impressive footage of the bucket.
The Bambi bucket's been used for many different firefighting scenarios and many other applications that one would never imagine.
And one of those applications was in the tsunami and earthquake in Japan. It was used to help extinguish the pour seawater into the nuclear reactors. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, after the earthquake and the tsunami, there was so much debris surrounding the facility that the thing they had to address immediately was to cool the core of the reactor.
Right.
And so the first thing they wanted to do was get fire trucks in there and get hoses in there and everything, but there's so much debris they couldn't begin to do that. Of course, they immediately started clearing to get those fire trucks in, but in the meantime, they needed something to keep them cool. So they put the Japanese military to work with, they used Bambi buckets, of course, and so that's what kept the reactor cool until the fire trucks could get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the shifts could only be, I think, about 40 minutes long each because of the exposure to radiation that the helicopter crews were.
Very brave crews to take that one on.
Very brave. And as we've seen from the footage, you know, up in the choppers looking down. I mean, they're at great heights. They're in these horrific conditions, these firefighters. Those in the choppers and those down below. It's a very great teamwork it takes to extinguish these fires together.
Yeah, it's all orchestrated by the fire boss, and he's up in another helicopter or an airplane, bird dog aircraft, you know, monitoring the extent of the fire. They've got a lot of new tools now, like thermal imaging from drones and satellites and all of these things. But it's a good science now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for other humanitarian work, it's also been used, I think, in the mudslides in Chile in the recent years, where some people were rescued in the bucket.
They had a mudslide there, and fortunately for some people that were trapped, the mud was 20, 30, 40 feet deep, and they were trapped in structures. And there was a pilot flying by, heading for a fire, and just happened to have his Bambi bucket on board. So he saw that there were people trapped, and so he volunteered to get them out. And the way they got them out was he flew to a place where he could land, got the helicopter out of the trunk, and put it on the hook. And then they put policemen in the buckets and then flew them to the buildings and loaded people in one or two at a time and flew them away. So it was the only way that they could deal with it at the time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What a dramatic rescue, and how lucky for those people.
Totally, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just last summer, another use for the Bambi bucket was in Switzerland with the droughts there and the cattle grazing in the alpine areas. The helicopters flew in water for the cows.
Another nice surprise to see that happening, but that's what it took to
to save them.
To save those animals. So yeah.
So another
and
application.
they've been used for many years for hatchery work, flying fish fry into lakes. They come in and they fill a bucket full of water, then they pour a given amount of fry into the bucket, and then they fly them out to the site. Yeah.
Now, Don, in any of these dip sites, do they ever pick up, you know, fishermen, swimmers, dolphins?
That's a myth, and do you know where that came from?
No.
That was started by a fireman in Hawaii.
Aloha.
Yep, and he just figured, I want to start an urban myth, and that's the one he started, and it's been on television shows and everything. You know.
Really?
I can't remember the name of the television show, but I saw it, and it started out with showing a scuba diver, a deceased scuba diver in the top of a tree. And the reality is you can't get scooped up by a Bambi bucket because there's a hub and spoke arrangement at the top of the bucket that's designed to keep the mouth of the bucket in a fixed position so that the bucket doesn't do strange things in flight. You don't want to create a hazard for the helicopter or the pilots or the crew.
Exactly.
And then the dump valve has got, it's an all fabric dump valve that allows the water in the bucket to dump. And there's about a dozen nylon purse lines in there. And so the person couldn't get by the hub and spoke, and they couldn't get out through the dump valve.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good story.
It's a good story.
Yeah.
Now, is the dump valve controlled by the helicopter pilot then? Through a mechanism in the cockpit?
Now, with the Bambi bucket, one of the things that was innovative at the time, and still is, nobody's replicated it, is that we don't go and put mechanisms down there in the bucket where there's water, there could be seawater, it's corrosive.
Right.
The whole operating mechanism goes on a control head which hangs from the cargo hook under the helicopter, so it's high and dry. And so the bucket uses gravity to dump, and that's another thing that's different about it, because all of the existing buckets before had like a plunger valve, so just like the plug in the bottom of your bathtub.
Yes.
And so we've all had the experience of having a full tub of water, and you pull that thing, and you have to put some force into it to overcome the pressure of the water. And so the previous buckets, they had to do that. And so the Bambi bucket uses gravity to dump. It doesn't fight gravity to dump.
Really?
And so when the pilot hits the button when he wants to dump, there's a little solenoid that trips a mechanism, and then it releases the trip line, allowing the valve to turn inside out through the bottom of the bucket and dump the load. That happens in a fraction of a second instead of seconds. And that makes a huge difference when you're flying along at 40 or 50 knots and you want to hit a specific spot.
Yes. Now it comes in different sizes. How many liters of water would the smallest one hold and the biggest one?
Well, thinking in gallons, the smallest one would be about 60 gallons,
60?
and then we go up over 2,000 gallons.
Wow.
So up to 10 metric tons of water.
And that would take a big Chinook or Sikorsky type helicopter to...
Yeah, a big Boeing Vertol or something like that. Yeah.
Fast. Now, Don, the other thing, and congratulations on this, but you were recently inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame and attended a ceremony there in Washington, D.C. for your Bambi Bucket invention. That's fantastic. And the Inventors Hall of Fame has been, I think it was the 46th or 47th ceremony that you were attended?
Yeah, the 45th.
45th.
Yeah, in 2017, yeah.
And it spans, the inventions span over 3 centuries. And you are only one of 14 Canadians of the 500.
Canada's not punching its weight in the field.
No.
Well, actually it is.
Yeah.
In terms of a number of inventions per capita, we do very well. But for some reason, we're not catching the eye of the people of the National Inventors Hall of Fame. And so I don't know why that is the case. But until I got the phone call, I didn't even didn't know the organization. So. Yeah, it was a total surprise.
And people can go online to inventors.org and see the list of inductees from last year who you shared the podium with. And it's dedicated to those who are innovators in science and technology and whose inventions have made a real difference for humanity, which the Bambi Bucket has done.
Yeah, they're looking for, one of their criteria is there has to be a demonstrated benefit to society. That's one of the things they look for. And they look for a product that over time has become iconic, that's been well accepted into the marketplace and has endured.
Yes, and has, as your product has since 1982 or so over the years. And I think some of your fellow inductees this year was the inventor of drywall and Band-Aid products. So those are, you know, household names as well. So you shared the podium with some esteemed inventors.
Yeah, I met the fellow who invented Post-it notes.
So again, another
and
household.
the computer hard drive and lead-free solder.
Wow.
And the SanDisk, you know, the little card we all put into our phones and our cameras.
Yeah.
That's come a long way. He invented that in 2 weeks at his kitchen table.
Wow.
And about 2.5 years ago, sold the company for $17 billion. So
sweet.
Very successful.
Yeah. So Don, where did this idea for the Bambi Bucket come from? I know that you practice transcendental meditation and you know how to quiet the mind and receive ideas and inspiration.
Well, the Bambi, you've hit on 2 topics there. The Bambi Bucket, the way the idea came about was I was marketing and developing a product line for a company on a contract basis, and that product were underwater lift bags that are used in underwater construction and salvage. And so that is basically a big teardrop shaped bag, underwater, the holes at the bottom, it's like that, and then you fill it full of air, creating buoyancy that lifts the load underwater. And so the way that we would test these things is we would hang them from a crane in a shipyard and fill them full of water, now the holes up top, and then we could measure the stretch and therefore do analysis and so forth. And I was looking at this one once. It was a 10 metric ton lift bag, and so 22,000 pounds of water in a 60-pound bag.
Wow.
And so I figured, well, that is an extremely efficient ratio. And so where do we need efficiencies? You know, where do we need lightweight vessels and everything? Well, aircraft. And being a pilot. So I figured, could I make that into a helicopter bucket? So that was my task. All the systems that we see in today's Bambi Bucket just came out in one evening drawing. It took over a year to actually build a working prototype. You know, that was a very busy year.
Very.
But the initial idea, they say inventions are 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And I've experienced both sides. Now you made reference to meditating. I learned transcendental meditation when I was in university. That was 48 years ago that I learned in Vancouver. And I found that I would give a lot of credit to that practice, which I do every day, twice a day. Because
for about 20 minutes a day or
yeah,
so?
20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. And there are advanced programs that I've gone on to do since then, but when you learn TM, you do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. And it takes you to a very special place that I feel it's totally necessary for anybody who wants to be creative, anybody who wants to be productive. Because where do ideas come from? They come from the deepest part of ourselves. And how do you get to that deepest part of yourself? If it could just be done, we'd all do it. But I was going to say unfortunately, but no, fortunately, we have to be taught to do that. And the way you get to that place where all the ideas come from is you transcend. You have to transcend from here to get to that special place. And all the qualities in that special place are, it doesn't matter which one you're thinking of, more creativity, more intelligence, more organizing power, more compassion. It doesn't matter what quality. The values are all infinite when you've transcended this relative world and go to the source of thought, basically, or pure being. In modern scientific terms, we can talk in terms of quantum physics. We're talking about the unified field. And where East truly does meet West is the realization that what we know as our own consciousness, human consciousness, is in fact one and the same thing as the unified field of quantum physics. So, and it's, you can't get there in a laboratory.
No.
No, because now it's a purely subjective experience, whereas empirical science is all about the objective experience.
And the idea is then that you sort of transcend the daily sort of white noise of your everyday life and transcend into that your own inner depth and allow that space and silence and simplicity to let other things come to the surface. Is that sort of a gist of it?
That's exactly what it's about. In the way it works is people tend to think of these sorts of things and in a more complex way than they actually are when you actually get a chance to experience it for yourself. And the way TM works is it gives us a very, very deep level of rest. The very earliest studies done in the 70s, the early 70s, showed that in 2 to 3 minutes of starting a session of TM, you're going to be resting at a state about 17 to 18% deeper than you would otherwise in a night of sleep, which for most people is 6 hours after falling asleep. So you get there in 2 or 3 minutes. Now, when you can rest that much more deeply, now the body goes to work and says, oh, now I can get rid of these deep-rooted stresses that our physiology has accumulated over time from deep-seated impressions and so forth. And when you get rid of these things from the physiology and the mind, now it's just like if your car, the brakes are grabbing and you think, God, the car isn't performing the way it should be. You take it to the mechanic and says, your brakes are grabbing, I backed them off for you. And you go in and the car's like it used to be. And so it's just a matter of getting rid of those deep-rooted stresses. Then your full creative potential is free to express itself. So it's a daily practice of going to that place where the body can get that extra rest and then just come back and get about your days. And the ideas are just much more willing to flow when you can do that.
What a wonderful thing to tap, and we can all do that. We're all capable of that. We all have that.
If you've got a nervous system, you can do it.
And the health benefits, even if you're not coming up with the next great invention, just the health benefits alone of that. Lower blood pressure, lower cortisol levels in your blood, which is, you know, the stress hormones, better overall health, better happiness.
What happens when you learn to meditate is all of those things happen. And some people say, well, if I learn to meditate, what will be my personal benefits? Well, you can never predict that because each person's unique and each person stores their stress in their physiology in a unique way.
Yeah.
So when that stress is eliminated, then that person's going to see benefits in unique ways to their physiology. But what you will see is improvements, and they can come very, very quickly. A lot of people will feel a bit beaten down by life, and they might be depressed, anxious, and so forth. Very quickly, within weeks, they're almost different people.
Beautiful. And I know that the Canadian Armed Services practices TM with soldiers who've returned from, combat, PTSD. There's all kinds of health applications.
Research has shown that TM is about the only thing that will deal with conditions like PTSD. And there's a lot of beautiful videos. If you go to the David Lynch Foundation website, there's many beautiful videos there of, there's one interviewing a veteran and his wife, and when he came back, she realized that wasn't the man that I was married to. And she was very fearful she would lose her husband. But a few weeks of meditating and again,
It's almost like recalibrating and, digging deep and finding space for better things in your life. Now, Don, we're just about to wrap up here, but what's next on your bucket list, Don?
It's a little bit of serendipity, like I still enjoy inventing. And one thing I've discovered, just in the past few years that I hadn't realized before is the value of no agenda time. So I try and structure into every year, we're going to Hawaii for 3 months of the year, and I don't do work there. And I don't have structured time there. And that I found is really, really necessary to clear the decks so that new ideas can come forward.
Fantastic.
And
Well, thank you, Don. Thank you for what you've done for Canada, for humanity with your marvelous invention of the Bambi Bucket. I'll look at it very differently now every time I see it flying by on one of the next missions. So congratulations to you.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to your next great invention, Don. We'll have you back for that.
Next time.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for joining us on Coast Connections. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.